massive, thick, heavy, and far too rough. Those are just some of the words that will be used to describe your man-me if you subscribe to the Real Life Ryan channel. But even more than that, they are some of the first words to be spoken in the Berserk manga to describe the signature weapon of the protagonist's guts, a weapon that was indeed like a heap of raw iron. And I speak about none other than the giant sword to end all giant swords, the Dragonslayer. Giant swords have existed in anime and manga for some time, but with Berserk there is an extra specialness to it all. So in this edition of the manual, let's dive into what the weapon is all about, some of its feats and features, and the significance it may have moving forward in the story. But before I get into all that, let's talk a little bit about real historical giant swords, some of which the Dragonslayer itself could have been based on. I think the first thing that we have to realize is that the bigger the sword is and the heavier the sword is, the more useless it becomes in a practical sense. Sword fights are usually very fast and over quickly. Your skill required not only the power of your swing, but also the swiftness of which you could draw, parry, and evade. Holding on to something so huge, awkward, and heavy would make it more than likely that you would get laughed at and then promptly killed by your opponent. However, there still have been some seemingly fantastical swords forged throughout history that have left their impact on sword collectors and people in general. First, let's look into Japanese history, since Berserk is a manga after all. And one sword to look at in particular is the Norimitsu Odachi, and I'm really sorry if I butcher the pronunciation of these words, but I'm trying my best. Yes, the Norimitsu Odachi. It is a specific sword and said to have been forged in the 15th century of Japan, and is basically a massive katana blade, which is sitting at a length of over 12 feet and weighing about 32 pounds. And 32 pounds might not seem like a lot, but when you have to think about the weight being distributed through the form of a sword and how you would hold that sword, to stand on your feet and wield this thing, you would probably need the mass of 2 Conan the Barbarians, and even then you wouldn't be able to swing it quickly. There is even a legend that the Norimitsu Odachi belonged to a literal giant. But the common explanation for why this sword even exists at all is that it was made for ceremonies or things of that nature, so it wouldn't actually be used in any sort of combat. Now, typical Odachis or Nodachis were about 1 to 2 meters in length, somewhere around there. Still not considered very practical, but seemingly used to take down horses of their rider opponents. So this would slice through the horse's leg, taking down the rider and the horse all at once. And the idea of this kind of sword existing at all leads into the fictional-ish horse-slaying sword called the Zanbato. It is a fictionalized weapon, and is primarily featured in anime and manga. One in particular is Rurouni Kenshin, which is another favorite manga of mine, and it's wielded by the character of Sanosuke. Yet he breaks it very early in the series and never gets a replacement. But apparently you can still call just about any large sword in anime and manga, and hell even in video games, a Zanbato. But even the Zanbato itself was an inspiration that actually came from Chinese origins and not from Japan itself. But it is interesting to note that usually we see these gigantic sword and tropes in fictional media from Japan. And we also have to talk about the Zweihander. Again, I'm really sorry for the pronunciation of these words, but the Zweihander, which is a German word which means two-handed weapon, and this is basically a longsword design and associated with the Swiss and German mercenaries. They could be about 4 to 4.5 feet in length and weighing about 4 to 5 pounds. So slightly more plausible than the Odachis, but still absolutely ridiculous in actual combat. Then there was this legendary warrior named Grute Pierre, who was said to be this 7-foot tall absolute badass who wielded the largest Zweihander known to man, a sword that was as tall as him and weighing in at a good 15 pounds. He is literally legend to have beheaded several people with a single sword swing. And if you could get the weight behind the swing and nobody managed to dodge, I mean, I could believe this is plausible. Now, getting to the Berserk manga, the Dragonslayer is even more ridiculous than anything that was in actual history. It's first seen in the opening chapter of the series, but canonically it's first introduced in chapter 93 called Armament. It had been forged a long time prior by the blacksmith Godo. He had been commissioned by a king to make a sword that could kill a dragon. though at this time in the Berserk story, there were no real dragons known to mankind other than just in superstitions. So Godo, growing weary of making the elegant, more refined swords that he has been used to making for nobles, he instead doubled down into the large butcher knife aspect of what he felt a sword really did, and he just kind of exacerbated the size to make a butcher knife for dragons. Apparently whatever king asked him to make it hated it, as it was seemingly useless and impractical, and so it stayed locked up, tilted against a wall for many years. That is, until Guts and Godo became acquaintances. And though Godo made Guts a different sword, it proved to be ineffective against Guts' new, more powerful enemies in the Apostles. But Guts, the badass that he is, shows that his strength, determination, willpower, and perseverance against the very fates themselves allowed him to wield the seemingly impossible sword, the Dragonslayer. And yeah, look how badass this moment is. I love it. But it is a sword that is awed and admired by everybody that sees it in action. No one can believe that a human being could actually wield something as huge and heavy as the sword seems to be, and that's for good reason. And one thing I love about it is that you can always feel the power in every strike. Miura really draws the weight and intensity behind the sword swings, and very, very rarely is Guts wielding it in some sort of incredible speed-like fashion. Don't get me wrong, he is fast, but what I mean is you can tell the swings take effort, and that they are big, loud, and nasty. They cut right through humans, trolls, demons, and much more. And this was a deliberate choice done by Miura to, one, make it different from other giant swords in fiction that seem to be swung around, defying the laws of physics completely, but also seeing a badass decked out in black armor, saying edgy things, and throwing around a huge chunk of iron, well, that's a good draw to get readers very curious about what your story is. But there is a lot more to the Dragonslayer than just brute force. First of all, we have to talk about something. Now, there has never been an official statement from Miura, at least to my knowledge. Someone please correct me if I am wrong, but from what I've seen, there has not been an official statement about the actual size and weight of the Dragonslayer. From most of the drawings, it appears to be about the same height as Guts himself, so what's Guts, maybe like 6'7", something around there? So imagine that for one thing, a sword being that gigantic, and then we have to talk about the weight. And different fans have speculated what the weight would be. Again, there's no official weight anywhere that I could find, but doing the research for this video, most people tend to lean in the Dragonslayer being about between the 200 to 400 pound range. Now let's put that into perspective. If you are an average fit person, you do some lifting, but you're not quite a bodybuilder or a power lifter. You're not really into those styles completely, but you stay in good shape. You lift regularly regardless. I'm sure you are probably able to deadlift 225 pounds. That would be a barbell with 2 plates on each side of it. It's difficult, but not that difficult for someone who's in good shape. Okay, so 225 pounds, alright? So if the Dragonslayer weighed that, 225, that's an average fit person's deadlift. That means that's their entire body using their core, legs, and back just to lift this thing off the ground and hold it for maybe a few seconds. So Guts is literally sideswiping this thing across his entire body and smashing targets in front of him with insane accuracy as he does so. Not to mention the fact that he carries it on his back from place to place everywhere that he goes, and he's always walking. So can you imagine the strength it would take to actually swing this thing? Go try to deadlift 225 pounds right now, and then picture that weight in the form of a sword that you have to swing. And that's not even assuming that it could weigh a lot more than just 225 pounds. If we are to go to the extreme and assume the Dragonslayer is like 400 goddamn pounds, then perhaps the only real man alive that could possibly use it is Ronnie fucking Coleman. Here's Ronnie Coleman squatting 800 pounds. So that's like putting 1, maybe 2 Dragonslayers on each side of the barbell. Picture that shit while watching this. Oh, also, he only does 2 reps. So, say it was only 1 Dragonslayer, then maybe he could do 8 to 10 reps. Put that into a swing, and yeah, okay, so maybe Ronnie Coleman could be Guts. But anybody other than him would be absolutely impossible to ever use a Dragonslayer. But anyway, so now that we established where the sword came from, why it was forged, who wields it, and how strong someone would need to be to do so, what else is special about the Dragonslayer, and particularly the sword with Guts as its user? When Guts faces off against a God Hand member in Qliphoth, we discover a few more things about the Dragonslayer that had only been teased thus far. In this moment, a God Hand, one of the highest, most powerful astral beings in existence, specifically it was Slan, you know, the one with the evil titties, well, she takes corporeal form in the form of using disemboweled troll guts to manifest her body. And even using this form, she was still able to massively overpower and subdue Guts. But though, even as powerful of a sword as it may be, the Dragonslayer could be useless against such a powerful foe, or so Guts thought. The Skull Knight informs Guts that because Guts has cut down just so many apostles and astral creatures with his sword, the blade itself has been soaked in the literal blood and metaphorical malice of all the creatures that Guts has cut down. So what does this mean? Well, essentially that because he's been using the sword to cut down so many unnatural astral beings, the sword itself has attuned itself to be more effective against them, capable of harming not only on a physical level, but also on an astral one. So harming a physical body and an astral self, or soul if you want to call it that, all at once. Guts was able to run Slan's troll gut body through with the Dragonslayer, and how I interpret it is he was able to kind of force her spirit out of the vessel, causing the innards to collapse back on to the ground. So it's not necessarily confirmed to be able to hurt a God Hand in any way, but it can harm on an astral level, and at the very least destroy whatever physical substance the God Hand is currently using as their vessel at the time. This idea was used again when Guts briefly teams up with Nosferatu Zod to battle against Ganishka. Ganishka's apostle form can expand around his astral self in the form of mist and smoke, so he was able to attack from far away from where his physical body was. It was seemingly impossible to injure Ganishka due to this fact, but the Dragonslayer, now endowed with this ability, was able to strike through and harm on an astral level, allowing Guts the opportunity to injure Ganishka. Once his actual astral/ethereal body was located, the Dragonslayer thrust through Ganishka and snapped him back into his own physical body, where he had an actual physical wound on his face. The only other thing to mention would be Guts actually using the Berserker Armor with the Dragonslayer. I went into depth on the Berserker Armor in my last Monster Manual video, the link will be in the description below, but rest assured when the armor is activated, the Dragonslayer becomes even more destructive, as Guts is no longer hindered by any bodily pain or held back by any tension or fear. His bloodlust and rage is brought to the surface, and he fights like a ruthless monster, whipping the Dragonslayer around as fast as is humanly possible for him, with no hesitation. This is where the fights become much quicker and more acrobatic, but it's due to the benefits of the Berserker Armor, and as stated in the previous video, the armor has just as many repercussions as it does its benefits. Now also the name, Dragonslayer. It is worth noting that as of this point in Berserk's run, the sword has not been used to slay a literal dragon, and this simply will not do. Sure, Grunbeld's apostle form is basically a dragon, but Guts fought him and didn't get the kill. And after the astral world was unleashed and merged into the physical, we got this amazing double-page spread of a dragon entering the world, and assumingly there are many more as well. So I got to at least hope and believe that before Berserk is all said and done, Guts will slay a literal dragon with the Dragonslayer. And yes, I know the term dragon was used as symbolism for something seemingly impossible to face, as in the quote from the manga, "Dragons are dragons because people can't kill them. So what do you call a man who beats dragons?" It's about overcoming what seems impossible, to continue to struggle in a world that will constantly beat you down. It's about Guts, a mere man, doing what seems impossible. Not because he has special powers or items, not because he's the descendant of some great character, not because he has some grand destiny, but because he is just a man. But a man that refuses to quit until the bitter end. Even if he can't slay the dragons, he's damn well going to try. And because he is able to try, he accomplishes more than those who would cower in fear. But still, I want him to slay an actual goddamn dragon in the manga. Can we make this happen, Miura? Please. Also, if you ever come face to face with someone who has a Dragonslayer and wants to fight you in real life, and they're not Guts or Ronnie Coleman, you would probably have a great shot at beating them since they wouldn't even be able to lift the sword off the ground in the first place. And if you try to wield it yourself, well, I hope you are a literal giant or you are very skilled at hand-to-hand combat because you won't be able to lift it either. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and that will do it for this edition of the Monster Manual. I really do appreciate you guys watching this and checking it out. I got a lot of new subs in the last couple of weeks, so I just want to welcome you guys to the channel. You are all welcome here. Let's talk about the things that we love, talk about Berserk, because this is a channel where we're just going to have fun with things like that. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Even if you watched a bunch of my videos and you haven't subscribed yet, come on, you just press that little button. You know you want to. But besides that, guys, again, I truly do appreciate you guys watching these videos. It really does mean a lot to me. Also, in the description, you will find links to the Berserker Armor video, also to my Discord and Patreon if those are your thing. Other than that, guys, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you in the next video.